Hi everyone, my name is Chana Davis and my brand is Fueled by Science, and I love educating people about making smart decisions in the realm of nutrition. And many times I'm learning myself, so I am a geneticist and I'm not particularly well versed in nutrition, but I'm training myself in that field, and so I'm bringing people along with me on this journey. Right now I'm learning about plant and animal proteins and how they differ. So I'm looking at protein powders first because I know this is a very practical question, and I'm comparing whey protein to pea protein, hemp protein, and brown rice protein. What I did is I simply pulled from the manufacturer's websites how much of each of the 9 essential amino acids are in those protein powders. Just a reminder, an essential amino acid is one that your body cannot make, so you must get it from your food, and there are 9 of them. So I've taken those numbers and I've basically put them on a different scale, and the scale that I'm using is one that looks at how much should you be getting in a day. Not necessarily a serving, but in a day. But I'm using that scale so I can easily compare across powders. They might be different amounts of powder that I'm comparing, but we'll talk about that later, what this analysis does not compare. So this is just saying, if you got a certain amount of protein from your powder, how many scoops it took to get that, how much of these amino acids would you be getting? And the goal is to get at least 100%, with a few caveats. But let me just show you the graph first, and we'll go from there and talk about what are all the caveats to the analysis. Sorry, this is super low budge, but let me show you my graph here. Okay, so each of the proteins, there's whey, there's pea, there's hemp, there's rice, and there's a little mystery one there we'll talk about later. And each color bar represents one of the 9 amino acids, and it shows you on this scale how much are you going to get. If this were your only protein source, that's kind of the question. If you got all of your protein from this, would you fall short in anything? So, the reality is you're probably not only eating protein powder to get your protein, but if you were, then what would happen? So with whey, there is good news for whey, which is consistent with what you've probably heard, is that whey, probably heard the term complete protein, and that really means that there's none of these 9 amino acids fall below 100%. So the lowest one for whey is histidine, and it's at about 108%. So it's above 100. There's nothing that is below 100. That's kind of how people define a complete protein, although it's usually not clear what amount of protein they're talking about in terms of getting 100. But so whey does very well. It has one that's relatively low. It clears 100, but not by a huge amount, and everything else is 140, 100, and up to 200%, or actually, sorry, there's a few that are up to 300%, which again is just overshooting and not really that necessary. But so moving on to pea, we can see that it has one amino acid that is below 100%, and that is methionine. So that means that if all you ate to get protein was pea powder, you would end up a little bit short in this one building block, methionine. Sorry. Let's just hold that thought and we'll keep going. So on to hemp protein. Hemp protein has one amino acid similar to pea that's below 100. It is lysine, and it's at about 84%. So everything else is above 100. One thing is below 100. It's at about 85%. Not a huge gap, but it's not 100. But again, that refers to if all of your protein in your diet came from hemp and you were eating just enough protein overall, you would fall a little bit short of lysine. It's a similar story with rice. Rice is a little bit low in lysine, just below 100 at about 80-ish%, low 80s. Just as an FYI, which is something I'll be getting back to later, rice happens to be a rock star when it comes to methionine. So you may have heard before that eating rice and beans is a good way to get a complete protein. Well, this is why. If you eat, peas are sort of in the bean family. Rice well, in the rice and grains family, and those two, they have different shortcomings or different Achilles heels, and so they kind of cover for each other nicely. The reality is, if you wanted to get all of your amino acid needs and you were in love with pea protein and you just didn't want to have anything else but pea protein, you could still meet your needs. You would just have to eat a little bit more protein than your basic needs. And maybe, or actually eat some real rice. You don't have to have rice protein powder. You might want to find another food rich in methionine, or simply just, again, eat more protein overall. You will still be able to clear this 100%. You just need to eat more of it. Similarly with rice, you could get enough lysine from rice. You would just have to eat more than your basic protein needs. The reality is most people can get their protein needs met from food, and the protein powders are sort of a bonus on top of that. Of course, it's a bit of a different story with bodybuilders, but we won't get into that. So what I've shown you is that each of these proteins has a different lowest amino acid. The lowest one for whey happens to be just above 100, whereas the lowest ones for the pea, the hemp, and the rice are a little bit below 100. Now let's just take this mystery box away and I'll show you. This is kind of the logic behind these protein powder mixes. So I've taken the data from a Vega product called Vega Clean, and what you see here is because they mix pea protein and rice protein, I think also some hemp, there is no bar that is under 100%. And therefore it looks pretty similar to whey, although it has different rock star amino acids. I hope that makes sense. What else did I want to tell you? I guess I want to tell you that really this is not the full story. If you're looking to ask yourself which protein powder is best, really my bottom line is that the amino acid profiles are not hugely different. They are not going to be, for me, the determinant for which one I choose. There are a lot of other factors to consider, which I'll have to talk about another time. One would be, what about the profiles of all the other amino acids, the 11 non-essential amino acids? We don't worry as much about how much of each one of them we get because they are readily interchangeable in your body, but some of them can play signaling roles as well, not just the building block role. And so the amounts of those amino acids can be relevant as well. This also doesn't talk about the other components of protein powder mix. So most protein powders are not 100% protein. They will have some fats and some sugars that come naturally with the plants or the whey. And those are going to be different depending on which protein powder you choose. That's another, just a different consideration. In terms of other ingredients, they also are going to differ in, this is brand specific differences in how they sweeten. Vega tends to use stevia, which I'm comfortable with, and you may have a different sweetener that you prefer, which would bias you towards a different brand. There are also other flavoring, additives that vary again from company to company. The last consideration, two more considerations. One would be heavy metals contamination, which I can't really speak to yet because I haven't really done my homework yet, but I'll be looking into it. And the last thing is just, I think honestly one of the more important ones, which is which protein powder agrees with you. Which one do you like? Which one tastes better? Which one doesn't give you gas or bloating? And of course, being a plant-based advocate, I would say ethical considerations would be another one if that's relevant to you and your decision making. So I think that's all I wanted to say. Again, the takeaways being, individual plant proteins will have small deficiencies in particular amino acids depending on the plant, but those can be made up for either by eating more protein overall or through the rest of your diet. If you want to get all of your protein needs met just from your powder, you're probably best off choosing either whey or choosing a mixed plant-based protein. And, really I feel that the amino acid profiles are not dramatically different enough for that to be the major decision maker. I would say the other factors are probably more important, and that's something for me to talk about another time. And I look forward to your feedback and your questions. Signing off, Fueled by Science.